All right. So the purpose of this recording is to document how to run Zoom for the UUCC services during the COVID-19 crisis. I've got Richard Gates, Chris Horn, and Leah Mostel on the phone. And this is going to be a bit of a walkthrough, recreating a previous Easter service to just go through some of the things to do to get set up. So there's both sort of logistical preparation, security preparations for Zoom, and then kind of technical how-tos to make sure you're sharing what you want the people in the congregation to see and what you want them to hear. Because it's a very different animal running a Zoom meeting for 300 people in a live service than it is 5 or 6 trusted work colleagues on a traditional Zoom meeting. So the first thing is you need to have the Zoom desktop client app installed. So the easiest thing to do is if you're going to be helping run services, go ahead and sign up for a free Zoom account and download the app, right? When you are hosting this, you will actually, the first thing you'll do, if you're on a Windows computer or a Mac computer, you can either move all your desktop icons to a folder to make your clean desktop, just in case you actually need to share it. Or with Windows 10, you can go View and you can uncheck. I'll show you how dirty my desktop is. I've got all these icons and I don't want to lose them, but I don't want to show them. So I'm going to uncheck Show Desktop Icons. So now it's pretty, right? So that's sort of first thing on the checklist if we're making a checklist. Second thing on the checklist is you need to launch your Zoom desktop app. And if you're signed in already, you need to sign out so that you can sign in as minister at uucolumbia.net. This is Paige Getty's account that allows for 500 connections, a large meeting connection. And she's going to change the password on Saturday and Sunday for the run through and the worship service. And we'll document that separately. We're not going to record what we're going to change the password to. But once you have that, once you sign in, you'll see all of Paige's sort of like scheduled meetings that have a date and time. This is her Revolutionary Love meetings that she's set up. UUCC worship is a recurring meeting, right? And it doesn't have a password because we're trying to make it easy, but at the same time, we do want it to be secure. So that's the first step. 3 steps. Clean up your desktop, download the Zoom app, log in as minister at uucolumbia.net. Those 3 things you're well on your way. The other thing you want to do is you will get from Paige and other people participating in the service a list of gathering music, recorded music during the service, and kind of a elevated, more than just the order of service that appears in the PDF, but kind of like a show walkthrough where they have like slides and things to try to make this easier for you, which you can print out and mark up, right? So that's that. So when you're doing the run through or when you're doing the service, the run through and the service are similar, right? The first thing you need to do is obviously log into Zoom, and then you can just go ahead and start the meeting. And we're recording this using Camtasia screen sharing software, and Liam and Chris and Richard are in the meeting using Google Meet because you can't fully record everything that Zoom does if you use Zoom to make the recording. So it's a little meta. It's a little look at this training is a little like Inception. It's a little bit like the dream within the dream. So anyways, you launch, you join with computer audio, and then here's a couple of things to note, right? If you don't have your video started, Paige's picture is going to appear because this is her account, and she's going to show up as Rev Paige Getty, she, her, right? Which is great for Paige during the week, normally. But the way you get around this is you start your video. I think I might have to stop my video from Google Meet. Hang on one second. I'm going to stop my video here so that I can start it in Zoom. There we go. But I am not Paige Getty, and you don't want Paige Getty. So you actually need, and I can't show you this, but just a little piece of black cloth. I've got an old black t-shirt that I cut up and a piece of blue tape, and I just flip that over, right? And now it's not like stopping my video because Paige's picture shows up. You leave your video going, but you cover it with a piece of black cloth. And then you can click the Manage Participants tab, right? And you can hover over Reverend Paige Getty and you can rename it UUCC host. And this is the first thing you do, right? And now you're good to go and you're ready for other people to join the waiting room. And the other people that are going to be, I'm going to stop this recording or pause it. The other people that are going to join the waiting room first or that you're going to let in out of the waiting room are other people helping you run the service. And of course, when you're doing all this, it's fine to have the camera open and you can talk and check. But when service gets ready, you do the black cloth and you're good to go. So
do we also want to mute after also?
What's that?
We probably also want to mute ourselves after the service starts.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to run through kind of some of the logistics, and then we'll come back and really get more specific. So again, we're in the waiting room now. You might have hundreds of people who've shown up early, but what you want to do is admit only the people in the waiting room that are helping run the service. So let's say that Alan Getty is helping you run this service, right? So Alan Getty would have the link and he would go to 349-682-603. And Alan Getty is going to join this meeting. So Alan has agreed. Maybe it's not Alan Getty, maybe it's Alan Coltree, and he's doing announcements, right? So he's going to start in the waiting room. And again, you could have your camera going to talk, right? You admit Alan, but you would leave everybody else in the waiting room. And then this, I think, is absolutely Richard Gates's. This is kind of a brilliant Zoom hack. Anybody who's participating in the meeting who you don't want to make a co-host, you can do two things. You can either make somebody a co-host, so if it's Paige or Sean Griffin or Hannah, somebody who's doing something like monitoring the chat or whatever, you'll want to make them a co-host. If it's just somebody who has a speaking part, then the thing to do isn't to make them a co-host, but to rename them. And all you have to do is put an asterisk at the beginning of their name, because for the way Zoom works is it's going to list all the hosts and co-hosts at top, and then it's alphabetical. So by letting people in early and renaming them and putting an asterisk in front of their name, it's super easy to find them. And when you have 300 people, it's also super easy to filter because you just put in an asterisk and then you can see everybody on the order of service that's participating. Because unlike a traditional Zoom work meeting where you might let people unmute themselves, we don't, right? So the other thing you do, again, this is all set up, so I need to make an actual checklist of this. But so you let in the participants, you give them an asterisk, or you promote them to co-host if they're there. You disable, you click the three buttons, the three dots under me in the participants tab to prevent people from unmuting themselves, right? The other thing you do is you launch the chat window, and you want to make sure that the chat is everyone publicly and privately, I think is the setting, right? So this lets you send a message to everybody. Hey, great to see you. It also lets you send an individual message. Like if you're going to say, hey, Richard, heard you got your butt kicked at the martial arts thing. I'm so sorry. You're getting old. Then that can be a message between just you and Richard. The host will see all of it, right? So it's not really private. It's just not going to be in the larger chat scroll. And it also allows people to do chat for support to Hannah. Okay. And then, of course, the third thing is Paige's meetings start with the recording automated. And what we've discovered is the person who's hosting, the person who's logging in with Paige's account, can really only realistically manage what's being shown, what's being presented on the screen, and the recorded music. What Richard has done is he's joined with another account and renamed it AV Record. And what you can do as the host is you can deputize somebody to allow record. So that's another thing you have to do on the checklist is let in the AV Record, click the 3 dots, let them allow record. And when that person records, they should not be in gallery view, right? If you're running the AV Record and you're muting and unmuting people, and I should explain, so there are 4 main duties for running a Zoom meeting. One is hosting and controlling the visuals. The second is hosting and controlling the recorded music. So those 2 things are done by one person, whoever logs in with the minister account. The other 2 things that need to be done by the AV support crew are recording the show. So joining with an account that's called AV Record, making sure you stay in speaker view, and getting deputized to record the whole service as soon as the gathering music starts on the local machine. And then the other thing you can do, so that's you're logged in with one computer with the AV Record account. On another machine, you're logged in with your name, and we'll make you a co-host. And your job is to mute and unmute everybody else with a speaking part other than Paige Getty. Right? So that's why it's helpful to have them asterisked. All right. So all we've done is log in, let in our co-host, promoted them to co-host, or renamed them with an asterisk. We checked to make sure they couldn't unmute themselves. We checked to make sure chat was right. Now we need to check screen sharing. So the way to prevent Zoom bombing is to make sure you don't have screen sharing available for everybody. So if you click this little white arrow to the right of the green screen share and go to advanced sharing options, this is a great setting for all participants if you're having a normal meeting, right? But what you really want is to make sure this is only hosts, right? Before you start sharing, right? So that's great. So you might think you're done, but you'd be wrong. Because what you need to do is go ahead and share your screen, and I'll show you why. So let's pull up something to share. So I think the thing we want to share is the slideshow. So there's always a slideshow that gets put together for each Zoom service. And this is an important point because a lot of people that aren't familiar with Zoom and PowerPoint, they will share this. They'll share the PowerPoint file with the menu and it looks like crap, right? You shouldn't do that. You should make sure you have these 2 shortcuts, start from beginning and start from current slide in your quick tasks bar. And the way you do that is you can click this little icon and go to more commands. And on your slideshow tab, right, where it is here, not slide master, slideshow tab, you want to make sure start from beginning and start from this slide. You want to make sure both of those are pulled over here, right? So we're going to go ahead and start this slideshow. And this is what freaks most people out because when you start this slideshow, it's going to take up your whole screen, right? And the way you don't panic is you either Alt-Tab or Command-Tab if you're on a Mac. But you need to Alt-Tab, and if you're not familiar with Alt-Tab, you hold down the Alt key with your thumb, and then you can just press the Tab key with another finger, and you can cycle through to all your open windows all your open applications in Windows. So we want to cycle back until we get to Zoom, right? And now we're back on Zoom. And the reason we do that is because now when we share our screen, we don't have to share the PowerPoint file. We can share the whole presentation, right? And if you think, okay, great, I'm done, you're not. You also want to make sure you share your computer sound because instead of just your microphone picking up what your speakers play, by clicking share computer sound, it'll give out a much richer, fuller sound to everybody. So if you go ahead and do that, so now when you click share, you'll notice your participant window changed, right? So again, if you're doing the recording, what you want to do is not just show the active speaker, but actually go ahead and minimize, because once the thumbnails are minimized, they don't get recorded. If you're doing AV record and you leave this thumbnail view up with the first 5 people, they're going to be on the video the whole time. So it's always best for AV record to mute that. The other thing is, now if you're the host, right, and you're not recording, you can leave that open to sort of see people's faces to get a visual clue. You can also click Manage Participants, because you're going to be letting people in from the waiting room eventually. And now, because all we shared was the slideshow, I can keep doing Alt-Tab all day long, and I can go back to some of the assets and some of the gathering music, and nobody can see what I'm doing, because I didn't share my whole screen. I only shared the slideshow in full screen. So nobody's seeing this. And what's important, I'm gonna share my video. The proof of that is right here, because I have another computer that I've joined to this Zoom as a member of the congregation, just to make sure I can see and hear what they see. Because when you're a host, it's different than when you're a participant. So I'll go back to being hidden, because that's the way I like it. All right. So let's say you were going to have this gathering music playing while people. So you've got everybody there. You've done a sound check. You did a mic check. And again, you can have 300 people in the waiting room. Your 5 participants actually in the meeting. They can do a sound check. You can make sure you see them. You can do all that, and nobody in the waiting room can see you until you let them in. So I always do that mic check, do everything. Click the mute all button. Don't allow participants to unmute themselves, right? And then I say, okay, everybody, here we go. I'm going to mute myself, which I would leave on normally. I'm going to start sharing my screen, which I've already done, and I'm going to play the gathering music, and then I'm going to let people in from the waiting room. So let me leave this meeting, all right, and start playing this music. So this would normally say 300 people or whatever, right? The last thing you want to make sure is that people are muted when they enter. And then you just click, you actually click Admit All. I was just proving that they came into music, right? So all the music would play, and you would know, because you've got a printed out copy of the order of service, what happens at the end of that music. But typically what happens, and this is weird, because sometimes what you need to do when you've got all these windows open is you need to click back on the slideshow so that it's kind of the active window, and then advance, right? Because what often happens is, instead of recorded music, you'll advance to the prelude, and it'll be live music played by Michael. So when you advance to the prelude, the person who's running the recording and muting and unmuting needs to unmute Michael Adcock's piano normally, right? Or whoever's doing the gathering music. And then that music will play. And then what typically happens after the prelude is there's welcome and announcements from a board member. So as soon as the prelude's done, as soon as you stop sharing, that board member needs to be unmuted, right? And that board member just needs to start talking, right? Blah, 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 blah. Because when that board member starts talking, their voice and their picture will take over on the speaker view and everybody will see. And then what you don't have to worry about is usually Paige is next after the board members, and she can unmute herself so that you can then start preparing. So let's see what would have been next in this service. We're going to go and open up and I would have had this printed out normally. I apologize. I was drinking wine. All right. So we did the gathering music. We did the prelude, which was live. We did the welcome and announcements. Let's say that was Ken Rock or Carla Gates. Page 2. So then sounding the bell and the call to worship. That's all Paige. That's super easy. Paige does the logistical things. And then it gets to music. So let's see what that looks like. So if we go, so the way that would work, whoops. Let me get out of here for a second and get back to Zoom. So right now, pretend that like Paige is talking and saying stuff, right? And you have sort of screwed around or skipped up or whatever, or you're getting ready for the next thing. I just want to make sure I have, yeah. So in the assets, we have Exaltate Deo ready to go, so we know that's recorded. But we escaped out of the slide, which is why it's so important. If you click this button, or if you just say start slideshow, it's going to go all the way back to the beginning, and then you'll have to forward and it'll stress you out. So that's why this is such a helpful thing, because it's going to start the slideshow right there. Again, you can just Alt-Tab back to Zoom. You can start sharing, make sure your sound is still checked, pick the tab. And so Paige is still talking, right? And she might even say, she does a good job of usually like queuing you up. Now we're going to hear the introit Exaltate Deo, right? And so you can start sharing your screen, and you can Alt-Tab over to where that recording is, double-click it. And the thing I like about the default music player built into Windows 10 is it just stops after the first one, so you don't have to worry about it. You can hover over stop share, so then it'll go right back to Paige, right? So then you've got your printout, and you're like, okay, we did that. Maybe we would do a hymn. We did the hymn, we did the introit. So now they're doing the chalice lighting, right? Which again would be spoken words, which was great. So while they're doing the chalice lighting, you're like, oh, I need to get ready for the hymn. So you can switch back, find the next slide. There's the hymn, right? Alt-Tab to get back to Zoom. When they're done with the chalice lighting again, you can share screen, pick the full screen hymn, click share, and be ready to quickly Alt-Tab over to the assets. And double-click "Lo the Earth Awaken." Oh, well, actually, the hymn, this was being played by Michael. So Michael's piano would be unmuted, and he would play this, right? And again, you just stop sharing, and then back in the service, where are we now? So we're at the covenant, right? So Paige might have a few words to say again. You could just advance to the covenant, Alt-Tab to get back to Zoom, click share, and when she says the words will soon appear on your screen, you can put them up, everybody recites them, stop sharing again. There are shortcuts to this in Zoom, Alt-Tab if you want. Then again, we can refer to the reference, There's greet your neighbor. There's a time for all ages, which hopefully is just talking, not a slideshow. The offering is typically always a slide because they want people to be able to text to that. So during the time for all ages, you need to get ready for the offering. So somebody can be talking, they can be, doing all this, that's fine. You can go ahead and queue up the offering slide and just be hovering over the share button, right? And you can click share when it's ready. Again, Alt Tab. You want to get to the music assets. And what is it? Messier pour le convent. Why don't I? So maybe that was live music as well. Because I don't see this song. Yeah. So this is Fanfares and Pipe Dreams organ concert. Yeah, no, that should have been recorded. Why am I not seeing? Do y'all see? Anyways, maybe I've got the wrong. Maybe I've got the wrong thing queued up. But anyways, let's just say it was this. And then that would finish and you could stop share. And then what would be next? A reading, which is usually just somebody talking, somebody speaking on front. You don't have anything to do. You can take a break. And then you can see there's a slide, how sweet the singing. So again, I don't know how many more times we need to do this, but you would basically get the slide ready, how sweet the singing, Alt Tab to zoom. Get that ready to go, have that selected, click share, Alt Tab to your assets, play how sweet the singing. And then when that finishes, stop sharing, and then you'd have the printout, and there's the sermon. You get a long break. So during the sermon, you can go ahead and advance to the next hymn. You can get ready. And towards the end of the sermon, you can go ahead and click share screen. You can pick the sermon. And again, share your screen and Alt Tab. We don't have to keep doing this. I'm getting annoyed and I'm doing it. Lo the days. Lo the day of days is here. I don't even see that as a hymn. Oh, that's because Michael would be playing it. So Michael would be unmuted and play it. Yada, yada, yada. Stop the share. Let's see what's next. Joys and sorrows. That takes a hot minute. Congregational prayer, music meditation. Again, you could prep the slide. And we've already done some of that music. Benediction, extinguishing the chalice, and then extinguishing the chalice. So as Paige is talking, right, the postlude might play, and then as Paige is talking, she extinguishes the chalice, and then the last thing you do is share the final slide for the upcoming week. And then you might want to go ahead and go back to some of the gathering music and maybe play where you picked off, where you left off. Stay with me, oh my soul. And that's really it. You leave the slide up for maybe till 30 minutes past the hour. And then you can unmute yourself. You can stop sharing. Usually Sean Griffin will still be in the meeting and a couple other people. And you say, okay, we're going to end the meeting in about 5 minutes. Great to see everybody. If you want, you can take away you can reveal who you are. You can say goodbye. And that's really it from the perspective of the person doing Zoom who's in charge of hosting with Paige's account, controlling what people see and controlling what people hear. So I'm going to leave the recording going. If there are any questions or things you want me to go back to, I'll leave the recording going for about another 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll stop the recording and we can start messing around and playing with this. Are there any questions?
I had a question. When you're changing the slides, I know you enable sound. So if Michael's going to be playing, enabling sound, that doesn't matter because it won't play anything from the computer. And since he's being unmuted, that takes precedent, right?
Absolutely correct. You only have to share your computer sound the first time you share, and it should stay there. And then just like you said, as long as you're not playing something from your computer, whoever gets unmuted, their audio will go out to everyone. And this is important. If you have a lot of musicians performing, you want to tell them that they need to turn on original sound on their end and adjust settings, but you want to do all that in the walkthrough the day before, not the day of. But everything you said is absolutely right.
So, I noticed that at the beginning of the meeting, you let everyone in from the waiting room. Why don't you just disable the waiting room?
So the way Zoom works, if you disable the waiting room, disabling the waiting room will allow future people to come straight in, but it keeps everybody who's in the waiting room in the waiting room.
So you need to disable it and then let everyone in.
Yeah, you could disable it, let everyone in. The reason I like keeping the waiting room up is because if I see, FU, blah, 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 I'm not going to let that person in, right? I do scroll through the waiting room a little bit. But I should explain, you do also have other people. So Phil Webster has been volunteering and looking at security for people who join who have unfamiliar names and aren't sharing their video. Sean Griffin is also doing that. So you do have allies in that department, but yes, Liam, you're right. You could once you're ready, you could turn off this waiting room, click admit all, and then anybody who has the link, they're just coming straight in, and it's on Phil and Sean to figure it out. You could do that. If you leave the waiting room on, you're going to have to keep clicking admit all, admit all, admit all throughout the whole thing.
So we're not doing that. The moment after we put in the co-hosts and the participants, then we change it to admit all.
Right. You click security. You turn off enable waiting room. You're still going to have some people here. Let's just do it. Enable waiting room.
But our current protocol is to just completely disable the waiting room. Yes.
I have never completely disabled the waiting room.
Currently we're leaving it on.
Currently we're leaving it on purely because I'm paranoid, right?
No, we need to leave it on because Zoom bombing is an ongoing thing.
So here I am. I'm going to join again, right? So Alan Getty's in the waiting room, right? So let's say you wanted to do what Liam said. You click security, you turn off the waiting room. So anybody who joins now is going to go straight in, but Alan is still stuck in the waiting room. If you had multiple people, instead of having to click admit by Alan's name, underneath message, you would say admit all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now anybody who joins can just come straight in. So if I'm Alan and I leave the meeting, now if I come back in, there's going to be no waiting room. I'm just going to go straight in.
So it stays on, in other words, and Phil.
I have been keeping it on, but I think Liam brings up a fair point. Like, what am I really going to do if I see, FU 9090? I'm really relying on Phil and Sean to catch that kind of stuff. So we could reduce the stress on the host by changing and saying, once we let people in, it's no longer your responsibility to keep people out. It's on Phil Webster and Sean Griffin to monitor participants.
Because they're not allowed to unmute themselves and they can't share their screen. So that limits what they can do.
Correct. So the worst they could do is right. So they could have terrible stuff in the background. They could have a custom background with hate-filled stuff, or they could be. But anybody doing that, Phil and Sean are both co-hosts. They can. You click more, and you can remove them. And if you remove somebody, they cannot rejoin.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So the protocol would be have the waiting room up, and then once services start, you
Turn
take
it
that-
off. And
Turn it off.
And just make sure in the check-in process before the service starts that you let Sean and Phil or whoever the security volunteer is know, hey, once the meeting starts, we're letting everybody in. It's on you to pay attention to the participants and to make sure people don't have inappropriate backgrounds or, whatever. I think that's a
Can
good...
we preview their backgrounds while they're in the waiting room, or does it not let us do that?
You can't. Like, you can message them when they're in the waiting room, but they can't reply back, and they can't... Like, if somebody joined in the waiting
Threaten
room
them, but
and
they
their
just can't
name...
respond.
Say that again?
So we can threaten them, they just can't respond to what you're saying.
That's right. So if somebody joined the waiting
This
room
sounds
with the
like a
name...
good thing.
If somebody joined the waiting room with the name Adolf Hitler, you could message everybody in the waiting room and say, hey, Adolf Hitler, not funny. You're not going to be let in. You need to leave and rejoin with your real name, or leave and not come back, right?
Right.
But they can't respond to you. They can't chat back from the waiting room, and they can't rename themselves. They would have to leave. Are there any other questions before I stop the Camtasia recording?
Let me see. Not particularly.
All right.
No.
So let me see how long this is. So it's only 36 minutes. That's not too bad. All right. So I'm going to stop the recording. And I think that 30